What's up, guys? It is fantasy draft season, and we're going to come at you with 10 tips to destroy your league mates in your auction drafts. Not redraft, not dynasty. This is auction, and we got you to win your league this year. Okay, so I got my boy Andy back on the channel. Last year, we did a tips and tricks for redraft, snake draft leagues. This year, we are coming at you with auction tips. Honestly, Andy and I play in an auction league. It's one of our favorite leagues, if not our favorite league of the year. So, Andy, nice to have you on. And you stoked to talk some auction with me?
Dude, I love auction league. I kind of wish all my other leagues were auction leagues because there's so much freedom to go get who you want. You know, it's harder to do research and do mock drafts. And so, everybody's just kind of thrown into this auction pit, and, drafts can go super wild, like even more wild than traditional snake drafts. So I absolutely love it. You can get who you really want. If you're sitting there at pick 12 in a snake draft, you're not getting Bijan Robinson. In an auction draft, anything is possible. So
yeah, 100%. I think you nailed it, man. I mean, I feel like there's such a it's very common for people to just lean on ADP and lean on sites rankings. And so a lot of drafts kind of go a lot more similar to each other than I really think they should. And it can be a little boring. Auction is the absolute wild, wild west. So we're here, guys. We're here to help you with your auction league. If you've never played auction before, or even if you have played a little bit and you're looking to improve at it. And Andy's going to start you off with our first tip of the day. Don't be afraid to come out swinging.
That is right. And it kind of depends on how long your league's been together, how long you guys have been doing it. But I mean, Sam and I have been in a league for like 6 or 7 years, and it was still true last year. It's a super flex league that we have. And, people could be a little gun shy. Josh Allen was the 4th player nominated, first quarterback off the board, and he went for $45. Right after he went, Mahomes, Stroud, Hurts, Lamar, Burrow, all went for more money than Josh Allen, who was the QB1 in redraft. So sometimes right when the draft starts, some people might be a little afraid to start spending money. They want to see what everybody else is doing, get a feel for how much guys are going to go for, and just don't be afraid. If this is one of those premier players and you want him on your team, go spend that premier money on him. And there's a good chance that he might look like a steal at the end of the draft when people are then overpaying for, some of the other guy, or paying more for the other guys in that same tier or even a tier below.
Yeah, I mean, just because exactly like you said, this is when I have to kind of coach myself up to every year, because I don't like to spend a lot of money right away. It can kind of weird me out, and I like to have money around, but every single year, there's always those couple players that go early, and you're like, dude, I could have had that guy. Why didn't I just hit? You're hitting bid up, you're hitting bid up, you're hitting bid up, and then that last time you don't click it, and you're like, I probably should have just clicked it. I probably should have just clicked it, because now I'm just bidding for Lamar Jackson, and I'm paying $10 more.
Yep.
But our next tip, and this is something, not only should you use this in your redraft league, but for me, tiers are everything in auction. And what I mean by that is if you have a group of players, because there is not a set order that these players are going to go in like a snake draft, ideally, basically, you can have a group of 6 or 7 players that you would actually be willing to spend the exact same dollar amount on. So even though, let's say you want Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, or Jahmyr Gibbs, if for some reason Saquon Barkley is going for an absurd amount, you still are able to get a running back in that top tier. But you also need to pay attention, and I think this is the key for me when it comes to tiers. Now, I'm going to combine this first tip as part of my tiers tip here. I need to improve personally about going after the first player nominated in a tier. That's the one I think I need to get better at. But what I can guarantee you is you do not want to be going after the last player in a tier, because that's when it starts to get way more money and way more bid up than you want to spend on a player, because you are not the only one that recognizes this is the last first round wide receiver available. This is the last QB1. This is the last tight end of, Bowers and McBride. If 10 people wanted Bowers or McBride and Bowers is gone, there's a chance McBride goes for more money than Brock Bowers.
Yeah, that is super true. And especially with, those early top tiers, hitting it early and getting one of those guys and not waiting to the end. But then once you go a few tiers down, look at how many people are in those tiers. If there's still, for your wide receiver twos, there's 5 guys you like. People are going to start running out of money. And at that point, when it gets lower, you might be able to wait a little bit longer for some of those guys and get them at a really good value. But the top tiers, you got to go after them hard and early. And then later you can play a little bit more of a patience waiting game. But you have to be able to kind of keep track and know where you're at and know where everybody else is at there too.
Yeah, I mean, if I was trying to make one rule for it, I would say in general, attack the middle of a tier. But sometimes the best deal can actually be on the front swing of a tier. It's really hard to say. But we're going to move into our next tip. And anyone that's ever played an auction draft, you would think this seems logical, but some people still don't understand it. And that's nominating players you don't want.
Yeah, and I think this is absolutely key. Because if you bring up a player that you don't want, like for instance, I'm a little skeptical of Chris Olave this year. I nominated him out there. I don't have to bid on him. Somebody else is going to at least want him to spend on him. And once they say spend $15, $20 on Olave, that's less money that they have to then outbid me on other players. When you're in an auction draft, you're competing against 11 other teams for each player. But all of a sudden you throw out a few players you don't really like, maybe they get bid up a little bit, they go. All of a sudden those teams are low on money and now you're competing against 7 teams, 8 teams, 6 teams. And so it makes it way easier to get the guys you want at a better price. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And I would even like to add another thing, and I think this is a word that I think kind of summarizes a lot of what you're saying too, that I like to think about, is not only nominate players you don't want, but nominate players you believe are overhyped. Yes. Because not only do you then not want them, but if there's a very hot name going in, the second round, the third round, that's a guy that's completely off your draft board, that's the guy to nominate because he's going to get bid up, but you had no interest in him anyway.
For sure. And the drafts can go pretty fast. So what I recommend, put guys in your queue before it starts, because you have to nominate somebody. Like in our league, you have 10 seconds to do it. Before the draft starts, make a list of those guys, those overhyped guys, the guys you don't want. Put, 10 of them, 15 of them in that queue. And then, once it gets to the end and people are low, you can delete them. But then it's just super easy. You're just slinging out these grenades that somebody's going to catch.
Yeah. And just to wrap up this point, this is for the first 2/3 of your draft. Yes. The last third, when players are starting to get more at $1 potentially in that dollar run of auction drafts. Anyone who's played a bunch of auction drafts understands what we're saying. At the end, it kind of does turn into a snake draft when everyone only has basically $1 or $2 left. But that point, you do want to nominate players you want because you are going to end up with them. So don't be wasting that on a crappy backup running back. You're like, dude, I'm going to nominate, Will Shipley because I want the Barkley owner to get him. And then you end up with Will Shipley. You go, dude, I have $30 left, and that's my last player. Is Will So be smart. Obviously, take this tip with a grain of salt. My next tip here, and I think this, along with kind of the tiers, and I think these first 4 or 5 tips we're going to be talking about today are incredibly important. And that's be patient. There will be deals to come. And what that means is, yes, do not be afraid to come out swinging, get a guy on your team. But also, so much of the draft and so much of the outcome of your auction draft will be won based on how the second half of that draft goes. And I like to have enough money that I can involve myself to get players on my list that I'm targeting. Whether that's going after some players for $2, $3, or $4. I think in general, some of the best deals you get in auction are those $2 to $5 players. If you're working with a $200 budget, So adjust that percentage to whatever budget you're working with. But in general, it's just like that's kind of where a bulk of these players that if you are playing redraft in a snake format, that like 6th through 10th round where so many potential league winners or breakouts or sleepers or whatever you want to call them come from, those players end up going for $1, $2, $3 in your auction format, which some people's brains don't necessarily connect it like that. When they think $1 player, to use our example from earlier, they're thinking, oh, dude, I'll just get Will Shipley. I have Saquon Barkley. And I don't mean to crap on Will Shipley. I actually do like Will Shipley. But you could be getting, like a starting wide receiver for $1. You don't have to aim super low on all your players to fill out your bench and fill out your flex.
Oh, for sure. And, I think that goes right in with our next point is, spend up on a couple studs. When you have a $200 budget, it looks scary if you're spending $50, $60, $65 on one player. It seems like a lot, but there are going to be deals, like Sam said, later on in the draft. And, getting a couple super high level guys, those guys are locked into your roster. As long as they stay healthy, you have a positional advantage there. And, that big money, would it look scary? I mean, literally last year in our draft, it is a super flex, but Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy, Jackson Smith-Njigba all went for $2. There are lots of steals that can be had there. I mean, it's crazy to go back and look at it and be like, oh my God, like if you had $6, you got these 3 guys, like you had a super team plus all the guys you spent up on. So, go for some studs. Don't wait for all the top tiers to be done. And then you're trying to piece together this team with these $20, $30 players where, yeah, you might have a real deep team, but one, it's going to be super tough to cut somebody come waiver season. And 2, it's you don't really have that top end potential like you would if you even got 1 stud or 2 studs.
Yeah. And just like Andy was saying, like, all those players he listed from last year, those were 8th rounders, 9th rounders in a snake format. And that's the thing is like, that's starters. Like those are starters for your snake draft team that are only going for $1 or $2. And, we set this up perfectly because look at our topics going into each other. It's almost like we planned this show for you guys. But the best way to set yourself up to get an Xavier Worthy for $2 is to monitor your cash flow and don't be afraid to adjust your prices with the flow of the draft. And what I mean by that is it really goes back to when I was talking about tiers, and that's usually some sort of pattern will begin to emerge in your auction draft. For example, let's say Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase both go off the board. One of them goes off for $52. The other goes for $54. Most likely, when CeeDee Lamb comes up, he's going to go for around that price. If your build and one of your studs was you wanted a stud wide receiver, it's okay to go for it. Now, you just need to be careful not to spend $65. And that goes back to what we talked about with tiers is not going after the last player in a tier. And the second half of that, monitoring your cash flow, would be not only pay attention to your own cash flow, but pay attention to other people's cash flows. I mean, there's a lot of times where come these end of drafts, come the second half, there's 2 or 3 players with money. And if you do the math quickly in your head and you go, if I bid $8, Andy can't outbid me for this player. So instead of clicking bid up, you type 8 in and then he cannot bid $8 for that player.
Yeah. And that's a great way, like at the end of the draft, if there's one last person you really want, that's the way you want to do it because there's no use leaving your draft with money. That doesn't get rolled over into Fab. You don't get bonus points on the season for keeping it. So if you find yourself, oh, everybody else has $8 left and I still have 40, you've done something very wrong. So don't be afraid to spend, but, see where everybody else is at.
So moving into our next one here, and this is just a classic. Andy, what do you mean by this?
So I love this. Yeah, starting with your defense or kicker. So just nominate them first. These positions don't matter as much. It's going to throw everybody off just a little bit. And every once in a while, I'll put a defense up and then somebody bids on it. And it's like, wow, you just paid $2, maybe $3 for a defense. That's more than Brian Thomas Jr. was worth last year. Like, think about the value that they're missing out on by spending that on a defense. And so this way, if they bid it up, somebody else has spent the money. If not, you've already got one of the top kickers, one of the top defenses locked in. Even though it doesn't matter nearly as much as the other players, it's a slight little advantage to get you going, and kind of easy into the draft.
And two, like, it's really one of those things where it's like, then you don't have to nominate someone that, like, a real player that you want, and you let other people deal with the nominating part of the draft, where it's like, I don't mind nominating players. And like I said, I'll tend to nominate overhyped players or guys that rise up the ranks. But also, like, you don't want to nominate someone that you want to target later in the draft. And so just get the kicker, get your defense. Option 3, don't have a league with defenses or kickers, but that is for a separate conversation. Now we're going to get into some more of the nuances, I would say, of auction. I think a lot of what we went over is the basics. This is going to set you up to succeed in your league. This is going to set you up. But here comes the nuance of what's so fun about an auction league and what can be terrifying to someone who may be new to an auction league. And that is, well, I didn't want the player, so I didn't bid at all. Like, I didn't want whoever. Like, why would I place a bid on someone I don't want? And it really does kind of come down to, like, I just want to make sure that people are spending an appropriate amount of money on players, but I also don't want to over-involve myself in anything. And I will never place a bid on something that I would not feel comfortable if it went through. Now, that is easier said than done because you're trying to play a game of chicken. And sometimes you have to be okay with, like, not getting a guy that was on your, like, must draft list, but you're just like, okay, that's fine value. I got Terry McLaurin for Terry McLaurin value, and I'm okay with that on my team. And you just got to be careful, though, with this one, because, like, sometimes your friends can tell when you're, like, getting a little antsy for something. I don't know, Andy. What's your thought on this? I think this topic specifically we could talk about for like 2 hours.
Oh, yeah. And this is part of the huge fun of auction drafts. And I think it works a lot better at the beginning of the draft when people have money. It gets real spooky when the dollars get low if you start to try and bid somebody up from $7 to $8. And you don't really want them because there's a good chance they're going to cut bait. But where if it's, a player like Tyreek Hill who's going way undervalued because, people are down on him, like, if I got him for way undervalued, I'm okay with taking that risk. But, I want to make sure that if somebody really likes them, that they're paying a better price. They have less money to then go after my guys later. So, do it cautiously. If your friend's a huge Packer fan, you might be able to bid up the Packers a little bit, make me a little angry, and I might overspend on them. But
yeah, it's good to, I would say, like, I do this more internally in my mind than I do, but, like, if someone was, like, a more physical, like, information in front of them type of person, go through your league, go through the last couple years of your league, write down players that people had, write down patterns of players that have owners that have owned players multiple times. Write down owners' favorite NFL teams. All of that information will probably lead to them being more likely to bid for a player. There are guys in our league that end up with Josh Allen 4 out of 5 years. He's going to keep bidding for that player. It happens way more than you would think. Especially if you're in multiple leagues with people, you tend to know. Like, Andy and I know how to bid each other up, and sometimes we'll call chicken and let the other player have it. But also, like, we do enough content together that I know who Andy usually wants. It's just like, do I want to play this game? Or, like, if I don't play this game, like, maybe Andy won't play this game with me and we can just be nice to each other. Like, it's hard to say. Yeah, it's really hard to say. But this is the joy of auction. It's the bidding, and it's fun to click the button.
Oh, it's the best. It's
very, very fun to click the button. But let's move into our next point. I think this is another thing that's fun about auction draft. And he talked to us about stacking, why stacking in general should be something we're targeting to do, and why in an auction draft it's actually way easier.
Yeah, in an auction draft, you can get whoever you want. There's no ADP. There's no oh, I'm not going to be able to get them because they're going to be gone and I'm picking at the turn. And, you can literally get whoever you want. And just by stacking, you just increase your odds of having a monster week. You also slightly increase your odds of having a down week. But if you're trying to win a fantasy championship, you have to have the best team, not an okay team. So it can give you, a big boom and really win your week if your guys both go off. So, if I take McBride in my auction draft and, I'm looking at a quarterback to take, I don't take one of the top guys. I'm probably going to go, maybe target Kyler a little bit more because then I have that stack. If I take CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens, I'm going to be looking at Dak in that middle tier of quarterbacks. So, think about it while you're drafting. If you get a good quarterback early, maybe, okay, who's a guy either on my bench or a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1, somebody who I can maybe target a little bit later so that I can get those big booms where it's like, oh, this guy caught 2 touchdowns. And now, my quarterback has a bunch of points as well. And they just won me my week.
Yeah, and also to at least the way I think about this, and just to make sure anyone listening, I think too with stacking, it doesn't mean you have to be like, okay, awesome. Andy and Sam told me to stack. I'm going to go get Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and I'm going to spend half my budget, and I'm going to get both of them. Sometimes it's doing some thought processes, and you go, okay, like I really like the value of Jordan Love, or I really like the value of even Lamar Jackson and QB1 or whatever. Pick your guys. And then you can kind of work backwards from there where you're like, okay, well, like if I want Lamar Jackson, like maybe I should go after Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews. And you don't have to go after both of them. And if you don't get Zay Flowers, that's fine. But maybe you can snag Mark Andrews or something like that. Or if it's a super flex league. I mean, I know last year I had like a double stack. I had my QBs were stacked with like multiple players. And I was like, okay, I'm cool with this. It was fun.
And it makes it so much fun because those swings are so much more volatile where it's like you could be losing by, 12, 13 points. And then one play, all of a sudden, boom, there's a 14-point touchdown. And now you're winning. So fun.
Yeah. And also just to add my 2 cents on stacking, I think stacking is something that like, it's probably one of the most common questions I get from real life friends on when you're explaining, like, why should they stack? Like, what's the benefit of stacking? They're like, well, like, yeah, you get a higher upside, but like, couldn't 2 players on different teams just both go off that same week as well? Like, yada, yada, stuff like that. And for me, the way I personally like to explain it, if stacking is a new concept to anyone watching, to win your fantasy league, you need multiple players to outperform either their draft position or their auction price. Let's say that because this is an auction thing. So basically it's a numbers game, right? So like if Jalen Hurts outperforms his ADP, there's a pretty good chance that AJ Brown and Devonta Smith are also outperforming their ADP. And so it's just kind of like decreasing the chance of like, you only have to then hit on the Eagles being good. Now, of course, it brings in more factors. Like if the Eagles suck, you may suck, but it's, you don't need to be third. You don't need to be fourth in your fantasy football league. You need to win your fantasy football league. And I'll go down with stacking. Even if you don't believe the analytical reasons behind stacking, and there is a lot of research, it's just fun. Like Andy said, like you're in every game. Like you could go on to Monday night down 80 points with Burrow and Chase, and you could win. It's totally possible. But we have one more tip, and then we got a bonus tip for you guys. But this one is simple. I mean, this is your best advice for any given league. But in auction, it matters too, I think, especially because, like we talked about earlier, I think the thing about snake drafts is that people are slaves to the ADP and the site rankings in front of them. Mm-hmm. The benefit of auction is that most hosting websites, Sleeper, ESPN, Yahoo, whatever you want to call, auction is not their main product. And so their price suggestions usually aren't necessarily accurate for your league style. Let's say you're in a PPR league. Like it's probably just giving you the same values that it's using for a standard league. Let's say you're a tight end premium league. It's just giving you the same projected number for a tight end, which is going to be lower. Same with Superflex, et cetera. So you got to be able to know that if a QB is in a Superflex league, but their values are below some of these round one players, recognize that and maybe see what the first couple quarterbacks go for before you come out too hard and like overpay for a player, because this is where you can kind of game theory your auction draft, you know, like play the numbers and be smart here and try to use your money in the best way possible. Last note on this one, if it is a super flex draft, which are becoming way more common, if you have money at the end of the drafts, always get an extra couple quarterbacks, because there's always that dude that either forgets it's a super flex draft, had to leave early and ended up with 5 tight ends or something. And I've been able to make pretty good tier up trades like before the season has even started.
Yeah, and that's definitely key for super flex, but it's, you know, key for any league is to know those settings. You know, 3 wide receiver league, wide receivers are going to be a bit more valuable, even if their expected value on the site is a little bit low. So, you know, figure it out and then see what the league is doing. But also, you know, if it's a super flex and they're paying low money on quarterbacks, then you should go get 2 stud quarterbacks, because the value you're getting there is extreme. And it's like, if quarterbacks are going for way less than wide receiver ones and RB1s in a super flex, I'm walking out of that draft with Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, and I am so happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, to really go along with what Andy was talking about with your studs, I think knowing your settings is a key thing for that too, where it's like, you don't have to go into your draft being like, okay, I'm going to get a stud quarterback, a stud running back, a stud wide receiver, and a stud tight end. Your studs could be 3 wide receivers if the prices are dictating that these stud wide receivers are just going for a more affordable price. Like, for example, maybe you could get Amon-Ra, Brian Thomas, and CeeDee Lamb for the same price you could have got Barkley and Gibbs. Like, in that instance, it's probably smarter to go for the wide receivers. But Andy, give us our last tip here for auction drafts, or just in general, your mantra when it comes to an auction league.
You know, and this is probably the most important thing. Just have fun. You know, go get your shares of the guys that you want. This is the one draft where you can really go get who you want. It doesn't matter what position you are in the draft. You know, if you're a huge Falcons fan and you love Bijan Robinson, go get Bijan Robinson. You know, if as a Packers fan, I'm probably going to wind up with a Packer too. I might overpay for him, but fantasy football is supposed to be fun. Get the guys you want to root for, get the guys you like. You know, if you find yourself overpaying on a player you love just because you love them, there's going to be time at the end of the draft where you can make up for it and get good value. So just make sure you like your team at the end of the day and they're guys you want to root for and want to watch.
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, I really do treat my auction draft as like this like supplemental thing to all of my dynasty shares of players, where I'm like, I don't have any shares of that player. And I'm like, I'm going to get him on my auction team.
Yeah.
Like, I really do treat it like that, because I just want to watch certain players. And like, exactly like you said, it's like some of my favorite players in past, like, are players I've had on a lot of teams or dynasty assets I've owned for years and years and years. Like, I'm the biggest Alvin Kamara fan you will find because I've had him as a rookie for a league. And it's like, he wasn't my favorite player then, but you own and watch these players enough that you just kind of like, if you're going to have fun watching this dude play, then like, it's okay. If having a stack is more fun for you, I will pay a 5% premium to get the stack, not only strategically, but just for my own joy. Thank you guys for watching Andy and I's auction tips and tricks. I think this is a topic we're going to start trying to cover more on this channel as it just becomes more popular in general. If you guys do have any auction questions that are very specific, drop a comment. We'd love to know how your auction drafts go. If you got any help from this video. Andy, do you have any last notes for anyone for an auction draft?
Oh man, good luck. Stay focused. You know, things are happening real fast. If you're going to the bathroom, keep that phone out because you might miss your favorite guys coming up. So go to the bathroom beforehand. Don't be drinking too much because it's, you know, a 2 to 3 hour long draft, and it's not like a snake draft where you can just chill for 5 minutes till it gets back to you. You got to be ready to go.
Yeah, pay attention. You're in for a haul, which is why it's so fun. But you do need to be alert enough because the second half of the draft matters so much in auction.
Yeah.
I mean, it matters in redraft too, but like, I feel like there aren't deals in a snake draft. Like, you get a good pick by like a round maybe or something, but you're not like, oh my God, dude, Sam got that guy for $1 because no one had any money. Are you are you kidding me?
No one was paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be frustrating. Don't get upset when other players get good deals. Like, it's going to happen. Like, it's okay. Focus on your own team. But thank you guys for watching. Thanks for coming to Dynasty Drip. If you liked anything, if you learned something from this video, please like the video and hit subscribe. We love you guys. Peace.